I'm Jas Schembri-Stothart, and I am delighted to be hosting this evening's event, which is all about teen mental health and school worries. I am one of the co-founders of Luna, which is a digital health and wellbeing app for tweens and teens. But we're also a co-pilot for parents too, to help you all throughout the adolescent journey. Now, Luna is the company hosting this webinar, and today we have over 100,000 teens and parents using our platform across the globe. We are a holistic health platform, so not just a teen's first period tracker or an emotion tracker. We'll actually cover more than just that. So we cover mental health, friendships, relationships, and so much more, because we know just how important these topics are for both teens and parents throughout this time. Now, we created Luna, my co-founder and I, because as a platform, we just wish it existed when we were younger. I personally had a very open relationship with my mum. However, there were just some things at times that I didn't want to talk to her about. And so for that reason, we built Luna, to be another trusted source for teens to go to when they have any questions or worries about their health and their well-being. Now, it's not just me tonight. I am joined by Dr. Katie Malbon, Paediatric Consultant at Imperial College NHS Trust, the Lead for Adolescent Medicine Trust-wide, and named Doctor for Children's Safeguarding and Chair of the Mental Health Steering Group too. Above all of this, Katie is also Luna's Chief Medical Advisor, and she has worked with us since before launch to ensure that we have the right processes in place when it comes to safeguarding and the right content strategy and approach that we take to. We're really, really lucky to have Dr. Katie with us today to input into this webinar. And like I said before, answer any of your questions at the end too. Now, I'm not going to sit here tonight and quote another mental health statistics, because they can be really sobering. And quite frankly, we see them every day, whether that's in the newspapers, social media, LinkedIn, and so much more. However, the headline, which will be no surprise to anyone on this call, is that global interest in mental health support has surged by 400% in the last 5 years. Now, from this, it's no surprise that around 1 in 7 children and adolescents aged 10 to 19 are affected by mental health conditions. And there are so many reasons, which we'll go into more later on in this webinar, contributing to factors in this increase. So things like COVID, under-resourced health and education services, increases in social media, digital ways of working and learning, and so much more. But we're really looking forward to digging into why this might be and giving you some tangible tips that we can deploy together to help teens today. So with this increase in poor mental health, we went to our teen community and we asked them, where do you go when it comes to mental health and wellbeing support? You know, what are their go-to places? And well, we were very pleased to see that 22% of the teens go to parents. A handful go to doctors and a handful go to schools too. But we were less pleased to see that over 56% of teens were going to friends, social media, or Dr. Google when it comes for advice, validation, and support around the topics of mental health and well-being. So we then took this a step further and we said, okay, well, why are you going to these places? Why are you going to these spaces? And we heard a couple of themes. The first is these spaces are anonymous. There's no fear of being judged there, and we feel like we can ask things freely. The second is actually getting comfort and knowing that they're not the only ones thinking this and going through this, not feeling alone. The third was around sometimes we feel unsure about how to speak up to parents and have these conversations, and we look to others for help around that. And lastly, was that sometimes they just want objective advice. So the real hard truths that sometimes parents who love us so much and think the world of us just sometimes won't give us. So we took what we heard when speaking to teenagers and we've built some of their needs into our platform with a feature called Ask Luna. Here we offer a space for anonymous questions and expert verified responses, except unlike social media, there's no peer-to-peer advice. And our ultimate aim with this service is to encourage conversations with trusted adults, whether that's a parent, teacher, a doctor, or a nurse. And often what we found is that teens just want to be heard and they want to know that it's okay to ask about these things and to have these conversations. And we give them that friendly nudge to do so. So let's go into the insights. So using this feature, Ask Luna, we've had over 43,000 questions asked to us within the scope of health and wellbeing. And 1 in every 7 questions that we've had has been about mental health. That's a lot of questions. So, what are the main anxieties and worries we're seeing specifically around school? Teens on the call, thank you so much for joining us. We're sharing this so you can see that you're not the only ones worrying about it. And hopefully some of the tips you hear here will also help you have conversations. And parents, educators, we're telling you this so that you can know what is front of mind of teenagers, because we get these questions in daily, hourly from teens. So I'd like to bring Dr. Katie to join me into the next part of the conversation. There are 4 key themes that we're going to cover now, and these insights have come from 100,000 members that we've worked with over the last 2 years. So, Dr. Katie, the first theme that we've had in is around school anxiety. And within that, there are a couple of sub-themes, which I'll go through, and then would love to open the floor for some of your comments around some of this. So the first theme we hear often is around the pressure of exams and revision. We're asked about revision tips to help, when it's a good idea to actually seek additional help because they're feeling too stressed or overwhelmed, what a good environment at home looks like for revision. And at the moment, we've seen a big spike around questions to do with exams and revisions, primarily because we are in the peak of mock season. The second sub-theme we've heard is around building public confidence and being seen. So lots of questions around, how do I put my hand up in class? How do I build confidence around presentations? Should I join new clubs to meet new people? A big theme around confidence coming out there. And then lastly, we've had a spike in of questions around actually lunchtime and eating, and whether it's normal to feel anxious eating lunch in front of others or in a school environment. So, Dr. Katie, I'd love to get your thoughts on what you think some of the key contributors to some of these themes could be, and whether you've got any practical tips to those listening who might be relating to this and nodding their head thinking, yes, I feel that in myself, or I've seen that in my teen.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jas. Yeah. So, exams and revision. Well, firstly, let me say that I think all these themes are quite possibly related to COVID. So if you remember, so these will be 14, 15-year-olds who were just sort of at the beginning of secondary school during COVID. And so I think there's a lot of feeling that, they weren't really used to doing exams, or they didn't have the same sort of run up to GCSEs that their peers might have had, or that, older peers might have had. So I think there's a lot of stress comes from that they haven't had the practice that they would otherwise have had. So I think acknowledging that to start with, that actually that may be why there's this added level of stress. And then, I mean, there are sort of simple things to do, and I must sort of put the caveat in that every teenager is different, and your teenager and what might work better for them than others. So it's not everything I say does not apply to every single teenager. But I commonly see girls particularly who are just so stressed that they can't really revise. They've got to that situation where they can't actually see how to go through their revision. It's just, everything is buzzing around their head. They can only really think of the result. They're anxious about that. And really, at that point, if they really cannot just settle to any revision, then they need to just have a break and walk away from it. But as a parent, that's quite difficult because, we have anxiety as well that they're not going to do enough revision, and that, maybe a break isn't good. And I think it's as stressful for us. So I think there's something about acknowledging that with your teenager, just saying, look, actually, I'm a bit stressed about this whole situation as well. What can I do that's going to be helpful? So actually asking your teenager what's going to help, rather than saying, all right, let's sit down and make a revision timetable. Let's do this, let's do that. Because actually, I think that can add to the stress of the whole situation. And it might not be what they really want at that point. And that might just add on a pressure, I've got to stick to your timetable now. And, so I think things that you can say, if if you feel that they would benefit from having a structured timetable for their revision, then suggest that maybe they could think about it and perhaps say, what can I do to help? Can I buy some paper? Do you want a whiteboard? Is there anything that I can get that's going to physically help you with that? Or, if they say, actually, don't want to do that, just say, okay, you might not want to now, maybe think about it in a bit, see what your friends are doing. But don't keep pushing, because I think, as I said, that just adds a level of stress. And then actually, when it comes to those days sort of leading up, sometimes schools will give them time at home to do revision, or when they're coming home in the evening and they've got to do revision, just really sort of doing anything you can to make that easier for them. So, if you all generally have meal times at a certain time, but you can see that they want to get on and revise, just say, maybe, would it be easier if you had your dinner a bit later, and working around that a bit, so planning the evening. And yeah, making sure they're set up well, all the obvious really, making sure, that they've got what they need. Popping in with the odd treat now and then always goes down very well, I find. And just trying to work with them, and not getting into that conflict. And actually, the other thing, that if they come home and they're not going to do any revision, don't jump down their throat. Actually, that's okay. I mean, maybe not every night, but that is okay if they need a break.
Yeah.
And then suggesting things to do in breaks. So, making excuses, like, maybe we need to kind of go and get something for supper. Should we just walk together to Tesco, or, can we walk the dog, or, why don't you go out with your brother or sister for just a few minutes? Or actually, the other thing that I found with quite a few of my patients actually who come in usually with some physical symptoms related to stress over exams, is actually starting their revision with a plan to become a bit healthier and start doing some other activity, whether that's walking or going to the gym, and building that into their revision timetable.
Yeah.
And it just makes them feel better.
And Dr. Katie, did you have any comments or tips around how to help people feel a bit more confident when it comes to lunchtime eating? Anything that teachers could do to help this, or anything that parents could do as well?
Yeah. Yeah, so the whole thing about eating is actually really a common problem. Eating lunch so many of my patients do not eat lunch, and they're coming in having, headaches and tummy aches and fainting episodes. And actually, when you ask, you realize they often leave home without having breakfast in the morning, and then they skip lunch, or they just don't want to eat with friends. So first of all, I'm a massive advocate of breakfast, because I think it starts the day off very well. It kicks the metabolism in, to start working. It wakes up your brain, and it stops. I mean, lots of teenagers tend to get stomachache if they don't have breakfast, and that's just because of acid buildup if they've not got anything in their stomach. It really is as simple as that. So lunchtime, I mean, if there are teachers listening today, I mean, I really just to have an awareness actually of the girls or boys who are not eating at lunchtime, and just try and I know it's different in different schools, and I think you're sort of assigned lunch duty, and I don't know whether you're able to sit down with groups of students, but I think that's a really good way of actually pulling people in to sit down, talk about something else while you're all eating together. And almost, I've seen some schools where they actually start small sort of social clubs at lunchtime, and people come and actually, we say, the teachers say, we're going to actually eat lunch together. So bring your lunch and everyone's going to eat. And I've got my lunch too, and I'm going to eat. But we're going to focus on, I don't know, it could be even exam revision and how to do that. So just making it more about the social event and not about the eating. Because I've also seen where it's gone very wrong in schools, where the teacher is monitoring the eating. And it's not going to work if they've got a teacher standing over, just making sure that everybody eats exactly what's on their plate. But also exploring a bit about, why they're not eating lunch as a parent, sort of asking, is it that they don't like the food that's on offer at school? So thinking about, should they now switch to packed lunches, even though that might be a bit of a pain, but would that be better? and just planning ahead in the week of, what might be suitable for lunch.
I'm hearing a lot about planning, which actually ties
Yeah.
into our fourth theme, but also can obviously be quite hard when we're trying to plan for our own lives as well as
Yeah.
our children's lives. But it sounds like that is something quite central to making sure everyone is, I guess, getting what they need and feeling comfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's quite difficult to let go of that as a parent. So there's a period of time where the parent is planning for the young person in early adolescence. And then in middle adolescence, you should start to do that planning together
Yeah.
and equally. And then, of course, the young person, as they go through older adolescence, starts to take on that planning themselves. That's how the trajectory should go.
Yeah, and they've
Doesn't.
watched and they've co-done it along the
Yeah,
way, so picked up the skills totally.
exactly.
Now, I just quickly say there is a question Q&A button actually at the bottom of the Zoom. Please feel free to pop your questions in at any time. And like I said, we've left a big section at the end for Q&A. So if anything that we're talking about is triggering some thoughts and some questions, please do put them in and we will get to them. So I'd like to move on to the next theme now, and I think we could cover so much on each of these subtopics. So we really are just scraping the surface here. But within the 43,000 questions we've seen within the mental health and wellbeing bucket, we see a lot around managing the somewhat taboo of periods at school. And I guess the reality is that today some teens are still very shy to talk about periods, and I wish we weren't here in 2024, but that is the reality. It's such a big part of a girl's life, and I remember feeling very nervous about mine too. And I think that there is a big cluster around teens worrying about how they should ask or tell a teacher that they might need to go to the bathroom, a lot of nervousness around changing their products throughout the day, changing a product quietly in the bathroom, asking Luna for tips, tricks, and hacks for that. So that is sort of one common theme that we hear often on Luna. The second is around school trip anxiety. So actually being away from home and not having supplies, whether that's a camping trip or just a day trip away. And then we also get a lot of questions around, what if I get my first period at school and I don't have what I need on me, or I actually bleed through on my chair. And this worry can really impact concentration of teens at schools because they're worrying on that rather than being in the classroom. So yeah, we feel really passionately about making sure that teens aren't worrying about these things at Luna and arming them with practical information. But Dr. Katie, what's your view on this? Are there any ways that parents and teachers can try and make periods a normal part of conversation? How do we do this and how do we open up the conversation?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you just said it, really sort of making it part of normal conversation and not not sort of making it a thing at home. So obviously, everyone will do it in their different way when they start talking to daughters about periods. I think start young. But obviously, again, there are things to look out for that make it more likely that your daughter is going to start her period. So what we call the sort of secondary sexual characteristics, so pubic hair, underarm hair, breast bud development. So normally in that order, so hair first and then breast bud development, or around the same time. And then the period starts, several months later. You can't actually predict exactly how long after, but that once there's development of those secondary sexual characteristics, the period is going to come at some point. So you want to make sure your daughter's well prepared. And so talking about it in normal conversation. So I think just not suddenly bringing it up at the dinner table, when it's all really embarrassing. I mean, it sounds obvious, but sometimes as parents, we sort of think, oh, I've got to talk about it. And I'm not sure when the time is right. And then, and you don't always get that right. So thinking, it might just sort of be triggered by another conversation to bring it in then. And to fit it into normal chat. If they've got a stomach ache, then it might be that your period's starting. You've thought about that, yeah, or that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
So the sort of about, I mean, all these themes actually also talk to that aspect of planning. So I think it's really, really important that girls have supplies on them. And always have that in a bag. A little, they often have that. I'm sure they would love another nice bag to to put the products in. And just always making sure they have that on them, without nagging, but just have a look and make sure they've got it. And just a nudge from time to time. And you can even, like, have a few of those and keep them in the bathroom at home, so they can take them as needed. Um, so I guess coming to the first theme about asking a teacher, what should you do in class? Well, first of all, for teachers, I think this is again stating the obvious, but being aware that not all students are going to just be going to the loos to do things they shouldn't do during lessons, or just not because they don't want to be in a lesson. And I have girls I see in clinic who have a terrible time just leaking during lessons, and they can't kind of get out. So I think being aware of that. I think for parents also saying to daughters, make sure before a lesson and after a lesson you go to the toilet, even though you don't think you need to, and change a pad, or just so you're prepared. So even though if you think it doesn't need changing, just change it. So that sort of planning and preparation. Yeah, I mean, I think that mainly sort of covers that area.
Yeah, no, that's great. Really, really good.
I mean, I guess the other thing you mentioned about the changing pads and things in toilets. So many of toilets in public spaces, and particularly in schools now, have to have doors that you can see under, and they're not that private really. And certainly do not cut any noise out. And if that really is a problem of the sort of rustling of packets and things, then think about other products. So using period pants, which are not noisy or rustly. So, thinking about other options, just talking it through again, actually doesn't really matter. All girls generally have periods. So, everybody knows what's going on. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. I think we need to get away from this stigma of it all being really embarrassing. It's just normal.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to move on to the next theme, which is around school sports and insecurities. So within this, we see a lot around period symptoms in matches. We see a lot around, body image and how to manage that whilst being in a competitive space. But then on the flip, actually something that I really related to is, insecurities in school changing rooms and not really wanting to get involved in PE because of these insecurities. And then the last one is like not feeling good enough. So comparison culture, unrealistic expectations about what you should be doing and achieving as a teenager. And I think a lot of this is really heightened by social media in terms of, what you should look like or you should be doing. And Dr. Katie, I know you're very passionate about both sports and periods. And we could talk about this for ages, but
Yeah.
have you got any sort of practical tips on any of these for both boys and for both boys and girls? And then we have one other theme to cover after this.
Sure. So period symptoms and matches. So I think really, again, comes down to preparation. And I really, I think actually simple pain relief, analgesia is used poorly actually. So you shouldn't wait until the pain is so bad and then take a ibuprofen. Actually, if you know you're playing a match and you've got your period and it's going to be difficult, then the day before and the day of, take ibuprofen 3 times a day. Actually, it works much better taking it like that. And obviously, I would never encourage medications when they're not needed, but I think this is really important that you can control symptoms. If pain and bleeding is a real problem, that it's actually stopping sport from happening, then it needs addressing. And so go to the GP. There are non-hormonal medications that can be used that help with pain and reducing flow. And if necessary, there are hormonal medications. And actually, there's often parents are very resistant to starting the pill, either combined contraceptive pill or progesterone only, or there are actually other ways we can use hormones that are not contraceptive to actually stop bleeding. And I think that really should be used if your daughter is not able to actually participate in sport. Periods should not stop normal activities. And then the sort of body shaming by the coach, and this is something that really bothers me, because actually, if you're doing sports to the stage where you've got a coach, then along with just the sport should be all the other well-being. So coaches should know about that sometimes eating disorders emerge during sort of emerge in athletes, and how important nutrition is in order for an athlete to perform, and that all athletes have increased energy output, so they need increased energy input. So I would say that parents should be really aware of that and actually have discussions with coaches to say, do you have conversations with the girls or boys about diet? Is there a nutritionist or dietitian who we could see, who might come and talk to the team? But it's such an important message. And again, I see lots of patients where this just doesn't happen, and they're having to manage it themselves. And so many people underestimate the energy output of teenagers performing in sports or being athletes, because actually not only are they having that energy output because they're doing more exercise, but there is some growing, and that takes energy too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then the last thing, they're not feeling good enough,
Yeah.
which is terrible. But I think if you're in a team and you're feeling, that's not what a team is about. So a team is about everybody supporting each other and feeling good about each other, and helping each other to feel good about themselves. And I think if your daughter is not feeling that, then it needs to be talked about, and sort of a bit of inquiry again with the coach into what's going on in the team. Is there a good environment, or is it a bit toxic, and do we need to start talking to the team members about better relationships and actually being good to each other and supporting each other? And if that's already been done, or for some reason that can't happen, then actually, if it's that bad, then maybe don't participate in that team. I mean, no one wants to give up and drop out. That never feels good. But, teenagers, especially in this day and age, should not be feeling that they're not good enough and not feeling supported by their friends and team members.
Thank you so much. Well, I can see lots of questions coming in, which is great. So please do keep them coming. But on that note, what I will do is go through the themes of this one, and then we can move quickly on to Q&A, because I want to get through as many of these as possible. So the last theme that we've had in, which I'm sure many parents, but also teens might relate to, is around future pressures and routines. And one theme, to be honest, which really surprised me, because I definitely don't think it was reflected in my teen cohort in my era, is around productivity. Like, lots of questions from teenagers asking, how can I be the most productive version of myself? What time should I wake up to be the most alert for school? How long and when should I be studying? What routine can I have, basically, to be the best version of myself? And we do see a lot of them asking for routine examples of what other teens do, and things like that. So that is a really strong cluster that we're seeing come through. The second theme is around exam results and not wanting to disappoint family. I think this is probably something that's been ongoing for many generations, but worries about exam results and what to do if they aren't as expected. And then lastly, worried about direction in life. And we get this from really young members too. They're really worrying about this in ages when they should, be out there enjoying themselves, and not worrying about what they're going to do after university, because we all know that things change, career paths change. I've done that and have now started Luna. And so, we do get a lot in there, and it's our job to sort of reassure them about that there are options, and that these options can also change as you get older. So what I'll do is I'll let people drop in questions for this one that we can answer directly, and move through the conversation, Dr. Katie, if that's okay, because I can see the Q&A going mad. So what I will say now is, I guess with the influx of these questions, like, what does this all tell us? I think this tells us that teens are actively looking for digital alternatives, that are trusted, that are accessible, and relatable to support them through the adolescent journey, alongside their parents, alongside teachers, and alongside other online resources. They want tools to help them have conversations that are anonymous and that will give them judgment-free and relatable advice. And that's where digital platforms like Luna come in to help teens throughout adolescence. And on our platform, teens can learn through expert curated content. They can ask anonymous questions like I've just walked through and get expert backed responses. They can track their moods so they can start building healthy habits based on what they've been tracking. They can track their periods too to understand their cycles, and they can take quizzes also to solidify their learning. And there are platforms out there like Luna that aren't like social media. In fact, we see ourselves as the antidote to social media. On our platform, teens can't give each other advice, only Luna's experts. And where we can't help someone, what we do is we signpost them and recommend them to get additional help when needed. We have over 700 pieces of content on our platform, and some of the top categories that teens are engaging with today are mental health, body image and positivity, and confidence and motivation. But what's most interesting is that we definitely see different things peak and trough as we go through different cycles throughout the year. What we've also shown on Luna is actually the positive impact we're having on teens' lives. And at the moment, we're running a wellbeing challenge, which is basically a series of mini challenges to help them build healthy habits. And after just 4 weeks of doing these challenges, the number of teens self-reporting an improvement in their mental health, body image, and physical activity has increased. Once again, just showing how powerful digital companions can really be to teenagers in helping them. But perhaps the last thing we're most proud of is the amazing community we've built and an app that teens genuinely love using. So teens are logging in and using Luna more than 6 times a week, and we'd much rather them be using this than social media and other apps out there. And as you can see, we have lots of positive reviews on the app stores too. And, it takes a lot to leave it doesn't take a lot to leave a negative review, but it takes quite a lot to go on and leave a positive review. And I urge everyone to think when the last time they went on and did this for another app is. And since it's not just been teens we've been supporting, it's been parents too. We're now actually looking at how we build a parent layer onto our app as well, because we know that there's content and advice that we can be supporting you with as well. So I now want to move into the Q&A, but just before I do that, I did want to say that we are gifting everyone on the webinar today a discounted subscription to Luna as part of our Black Friday offer, which is costing £1.66 a month, which basically means that your team would have unlimited access to resources, questions and help on all things health and wellbeing. So please do keep putting questions into the Q&A. I'm now going to stop sharing and move on to this. So Dr. Katie, we have a question around how do I get my teen to talk about her worries if she doesn't want to? Have you got any practical tips on places? I know that you're actually a mother yourself.
I think, I say this a lot, and when I say it sounds obvious, but I don't know that everybody does necessarily think about it, but just finding situations that are going to make that an easier conversation.
Yeah.
So, walking is good. So you're not actually having to sit facing each other. Driving in the car is good. Being on a train, so traveling anywhere is good. Sometimes, well, I've had my own experience actually of cooking together, and that being a really nice way to start conversation. And then the other thing that I've done, I found myself watching Love Island because I didn't want to watch Love Island, but I found that we sat there watching it. No one was really watching it, but we ended up having a conversation while we're looking at the TV. So I think, and no one, watched what was on in the end at all, but it was a great way to actually start a difficult conversation. So I think they're my sort of go-to ways of doing it.
Brilliant. I've actually had a couple of questions in around this theme about, advice for helping my teenager open up. So hopefully there's some practical tips there, whether that's in front of the TV where you're not having to look at each other, or going out and doing a nice activity together, or just a short walk to Tesco's.
Yeah, and it might be also though that it doesn't happen the first time. So you might go for a walk, and you can't really find a way of getting that conversation started. So it might be a bit of a silent walk the first time, but don't give up, go again. But don't, over, don't have too many expectations, sort of just give into it a bit. And with time, you've just got to find the right time.
And I think you raise a really good point around it being an ongoing conversation and not just a one-off, or you've had the period chat or the mental health chat or whatever that is. And it's about checking in frequently. At least that's what I've learned from reading the content that the experts create on Luna. I've learned so much from running this app. That piece around ongoing conversation.
Yeah. And actually the other thing, and I think that we often make the mistake of, is wanting to solve every worry that they have. And actually that's not possible all the time. And it's often not the answer that they want. They just want to talk about what they're worried about. And so just letting that, and actually, talking about your own worries often is actually quite helpful to them. So they can see that you're struggling with some things, and or empathizing with, you might have felt like that when you were their age, and but not jumping in and want to immediately fix it.
Yeah. Thank you. So we have a question that has come in around, I struggle with my periods and I get terrible cramps and other period symptoms, but when I go to the school nurse or the teachers, I sometimes get dismissed because a lot of people have periods and have to get through it. Have you got any tips around maybe how to have these conversations, or what this, I think, a young person should do next?
Well, I'm sorry that you are getting such, symptoms with your period, and actually, that's not really a great response. And you can get discomfort with your periods, but it shouldn't be so bad that, it's interfering with what you're doing, really. So, I would say that, if you're experiencing symptoms which are interfering with your daily activity, then you should go to the GP. And you can, as I said before, there's treatments just with painkillers and actually medication that reduces the flow. And then it may be that you need hormones to help with that. I mean, what do you say to nurse or teachers who are saying you're just causing a fuss? I think you can say, look, actually it's really bad and I'm having these symptoms that are stopping me getting on doing normal things. And I think it's a bit out of the ordinary, or a bit more than it should be, and I'm going to get some help for it. But right now I'd really appreciate an ibuprofen or a hot water bottle. But I think to show that you're actually actively trying to get help for it and not just sort of going in and carrying on, and then that makes you keep going back to the nurse. So yeah, so don't just let it go, do something about it.
Great. Okay, we have had a question around building confidence, Katie. So it's, as a teen, I always lack confidence and let people get to me. How can I stop myself from doing this? And I think this is a really good question because, it probably happens to everyone and not just teenagers. What would you say to this, Dr. Katie?
Yeah, well, just you saying that, I mean, I really remember that feeling and it's horrible. And I still get it, actually. But I think one of the really important things to do is surround yourself with people who make you feel good about yourself. So actually, if you're in a friend group and you're just feeling that everybody makes you feel bad, then maybe they're not quite the right friends for you to be with. Now, that's easier said than done, isn't it? Because it's quite difficult to extract yourself from a friend group, but you will have friends who make you feel better. So hang out with those more, and don't push the other friendships, because you shouldn't, friends are not friends if they're just making you feel bad about yourself. They're really not. So just question it, and don't just go along with it.
Yeah. Hopefully that helps out there, but just knowing that, also people sometimes act like they're the most confident person, but they might not be. So just remember that everyone's probably sometimes feeling the same. At least I
Totally.
get
Actually,
that and sometimes do now.
yeah, I mean, I heard of some fascinating stuff from someone, a psychologist, doing some research into this, and actually the popular girls, and because we all know those popular girls in school who seem to just fly along and everyone likes them. But actually, lots of anonymous surveys were done, and it showed that they were not really the most popular girls, but they were actually often just sort of feared by other people. So they felt they had to kind of go along with this girl. So it's not always what it looks like, I think, you know.
Yeah.
And actually, those people who are making you feel bad about yourself are clearly not ever so happy, because people don't act like that if they're really happy in their own skin. So just also kind of remembering that and saying that to yourself can be quite helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've had a question here around how can I get some more support as a young carer? Obviously, I've got a lot of pressure at school on me with homework and everything, whilst I'm looking after someone at home, and during school, I'm worrying about them. What is your advice?
Mm. That's really difficult. So, first of all, just, and you may already have done this, but just making sure people know. Quite often
Yeah.
you tend to keep it to yourself, and feel, you don't want to be a burden to other people to complain about it, but you're in an unnatural situation at your age, looking after somebody else. And that's a big deal. It's a really big deal, and it really takes its toll. So letting everybody, around you know about it. Um, and then also there are lots of, or not lots, but there are specific sort of charities and support groups for young carers.
Yeah.
So do try and access those, or a GP again will help you with local um, resources as well. So I think just finding out about the support that you're able to get. And then in school, whether there's a school counselor, or somebody who can give you that extra support, because it's a real, it's a massive and a totally understandable distraction, but you shouldn't be at school worrying. That, that's just not right. So just making sure you get the help that you need.
Definitely. Schools have some fantastic pastoral teams as
Mm,
well, who I'm sure will be able to help you find those resources and people to speak with. So don't be embarrassed or shy about having those conversations. It's what they're there for.
mm,
So I have a question here around my teen wears shorts for PE. And she's only young, but she's got leg hair and is feeling a bit self-conscious. What's your thoughts on hair removal? Should I let her? Is there a typical age? What's your views on this? And I think I guess this is a personal
mm,
preference here. Sometimes culture plays into things. I think, like you said before, Katie, age is you define when you think your teen is ready. But I mean, what's your thoughts? I'm sure this isn't the first
mm.
time you've had a parent ask you this
No,
question.
it's not at all. It comes up a lot, actually. So yeah, I mean, there are other factors to consider, but I think if it's really a bother, then, and it's distracting her, then it's definitely time to do something about it. Um, I mean, I actually, so either shaving, um, but that's not always, although I feel that the products are better now. But it's probably the easiest thing to do, or the hair removing creams are good. But we wouldn't really recommend anything else.
Yeah.
And if shaving, then you can get the sort of sensitive shaving gels. Just because the skin, at that age can be a little more sensitive. Yeah, but definitely help her do that. I think it's really important, actually. Uh, yeah, and it's the same. Some teenagers will start to get a bit of, and this can be quite sort of ethnicity related, but get hair on their face,
Hmm.
and can get horribly teased about it. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, it just happens, and especially during the sort of early adolescence, when there's a lot of hormonal imbalance. So, you can get creams for a facial hair removal. So I definitely sort of help your teenager with that, because I think that's one thing you don't really want them going and getting it sort of behind your back. I think talking about it, if they've got some hair on their face and you've noticed it, or they've got really hairy legs, say, oh, are you worried about it? And not many will say no, not at all. So I don't, what you're talking about. But
Yeah.
but actually, I think it's really helpful if you do mention it in the right way, in a sort of sensitive way.
I
Um,
was I am a very hairy individual and had very hairy legs at a young age, and actually, this question kind of hit home a bit, and I remember going home a bit tearful and my mum asking about it, but then explaining like the different options that I had, and I think understanding and knowing there are options and they're pretty much better today, 20
yeah,
years later,
absolutely.
and working through the different options is really important. And that's the approach we take at Luna. Like, we'll never
Mm.
push anything on anyone, but encourage the conversation and say, here are the options, pros and
Yeah.
cons in each. Go and have a chat. Like,
Yeah.
every parent or guardian will have a different opinion. But yeah, the main
Yeah.
thing is know you have options, and you
You
can
do have
compare as
options.
well if you want.
Yeah, and yeah, the last thing I was going to say actually, so some girls can have sort of quite bad acne and facial hair,
Mm.
and that's very much due to a hormonal imbalance. And there are certain pills you can go on to reduce that.
Yeah.
And it is a contraceptive pill, but it works to reduce the androgens, which cause the facial hair and the acne. So that is definitely a consideration too.
Yeah. Great. Okay, we have had a question in around how do I stop feeling anxious for my studies? I try my best and get very stressed during the tests and blank out.
Hmm.
Any thoughts on that one?
Well, I mean, a bit of stress is quite good. Actually, we all need a bit of adrenaline to kind of get things done and to, get through an exam. Actually, that's helpful. But if you blank out, then you've kind of overstepped the balance. So you need a bit of help with that. So I'd say, ask the teachers at school to help you, because I think a lot of it is in your preparation. If you're so anxious during the test, it's often because you probably either haven't revised in quite the right way, or just not either giving yourself enough time to do all the revision you need to. So you kind of know you've missed subjects or you might have missed some things. Or sometimes actually you might need help from a school counselor or a therapist or a psychologist, to help you with some techniques. So there are many sort of different techniques that you can use to calm yourself down. You might not even need help from a professional if you can actually access things online, sort of meditation, sort of things that you can do that with your breathing to just calm things down and sort of reset, and then so you can start to think about the question again. So sort of exploring options, maybe exploring what you can find online to see if anything can help, and then if that's not enough, then seeking help from a professional.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we've got one around how can parents help their school-going children move from a state of isolation to being more participative?
Yeah, so again, this comes up a lot as well, and I think um, it's also a bit, does that young person really want to be more sociable? Because there are quite a few individuals who are quite happy not really having loads of friends, and that's okay. Um, they'll go through stages in their life where they'll make more friends, but it's not for everyone. So I would just bear that in mind. On the other hand, you don't want someone being so isolated, that then they get into a bit of a spiral and then they can't then make friends. So I think there are so many ways of doing this really, and it is very individual. Sport is always a good one. So getting involved in a sport or a club or something. And it might be that I've known some parents who will go along to something with them, and then actually, once they've sort of got into whatever activity it is, they'll retract themselves and leave the young person to go it alone and make friends. Um, so again, it depends on the age of the teenager. So the younger ones, it's a bit easier. It's a bit more normal, and they're a bit more open to sort of going and joining a club. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. You can't force them to have friends. You can only encourage, you can suggest people come over and facilitate that. So, if they want to come over and watch a movie, have you got one or two close friends you want to come over, and we'll disappear, we won't be around, but we can, get the snacks and things that you need. So I think it's sort of working out and actually just having the conversation with your teenager and saying, first of all, is it a problem? Are they worried about it? And then how can you together come up with a plan to try and improve it? What did they think would help? That's often the first sort of way in, I would say.
Thank you. I hope that answer was helpful to whoever asked it. We've had another question around, I get overwhelmed and I overthink easily. How can I prevent this?
So, I mean, that's fairly similar to the sort of blanking out during a stressful situation. I think it's when your mind is just so full of everything and you can't kind of get any order in it. So it is about, it's a bit, going back to that sort of meditation or that sort of finding methods of calming down your brain to sort of reset. So there are, I mean, there's one that I do quite frequently, which is if you imagine a square, and you take, as you think of it, and you go up one side, and you take a deep breath in, and you go along the top, and you breathe out, you go down, you breathe in, and you go along the bottom, and you breathe out, and you keep going round the square, and you do that, for as long as it takes, really, and then you kind of reset, start again. Your brain has stopped all that whizzing around. I think most people experience that at some point in their life, actually. So the other thing to say, it's very normal. And it's just you've got a lot going on, a lot to think about. So just taking a few minutes to find what works for you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so we've had a couple of questions come in about exams. So we're going to make this a generic question about tips for not stressing about exams. Do you have any? So, I mean, I can definitely start, and then Dr. Katie, please chime in. And this is coming from someone who did stress a lot about exams, and something I guess I wish I did more is really prioritize sleep. And I know it's easier said than done when you're like, I've got so much to get through and I need to stay up really late to get through all the course material. But it's unbelievable how much sleep really refreshes you and kind of processes all the things that you've learned and you've read in the day. And so it's really important to do that and not stay up late with energy drinks and doing all sorts. So I think one thing for me is prioritizing sleep, but then also prioritizing myself and taking breaks and self-care. I think I often dismissed this and only later realized how much you can come back refreshed and ready to go with a fresh mind. So I think yes, there might be time pressures when it comes to exams and wanting to fit everything in, but it is actually really important to make sure you're having enough breaks and times. Otherwise, your brain is just stretched. And then the last thing I would say from an exams perspective is to find the right study method that works for you. So flashcards might work for someone else, but they might not work for you. And there are so many study methods out there, and I'm sure your teachers will be able to help you with this. But exams do really feel quite stressful in the moment, but when you get to my age, you start to realize that actually, I shouldn't have stressed so much. Of course, they're important. We should work hard for them, but they're really not the be all and end all. And trust me, that is coming from someone who really did stress about exams a lot. So those are some of my tips. Dr. Katie, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more about the sleep in particular. And I'm the same, I've done an awful lot of exams in my life, and I always found them stressful. So the only, and planning. So really planning well in advance. So I always did like to have a timetable and make sure I really sort of stuck to that, making sure I had plenty of breaks, making sure that I ate properly, and that I had time for a bit of fun in it all, and it wasn't just all about revision. I mean, it's always going to feel like that at the time, but just and not doing that thing where you or sort of putting in your schedule time for when it doesn't really work so well. So if you got to the point and you're trying to revise and you just nothing is going in, and it's one of those bad days, and we all have them, it's really, really normal, then just stop. Don't just sit at your desk for the next 8 hours, just in that same frame of mind where it's not really going in. Because actually, if you just stop and take a couple of hours out and go and do something totally unrelated and you come back, you will be able to do something again in that time.
Yeah,
Or you go away and you just say, when I come back, I'm going to do just this one topic. And then I'm going to call it a day for today, and I'm going to get an early night. Then that one topic will go in very well.
thank you. Okay, we've got one final question. And it's my child feels anxious about a lot of things revolving school, so including being late or participating in class, and it can really interfere with attendance and performance at school. I'm not sure what to do.
Mm. That's really difficult. And again, maybe that's a bit of a result of COVID and those missed kind of normal school days, which then has just exacerbated this anxiety. So, I mean, I think the main message from everything we've said today is about communicating and having that open discussion and talking about what things she thinks would help her. And then I think working with the school, so I found this a lot with patients who, I think there's a bit of a disconnect between health and education, and it's really important that we're talking to each other, but parents really need to get involved as well. Working out if there is some way of making school an easier option.
Thank you so much. If you have any questions about the platform and how it operates or anything, then please do email us too at hello@weareluna.app. And your feedback on how you found this webinar would be really helpful. So I know we're interrupting your dinner times, but please do take 2 minutes to fill this out so we can make sure the next one is even better. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you for signing up. Thank you for sharing the code. And I really hope you found this a useful conversation today.